Trigun Maximum Volume 4 was my favorite Trimax volume yet. It was quickly superseded by Volume 5, but let us pretend for the sake of this video that I haven't read Volume 5 yet. Volume 5 is as far as I've gone, so spoiler ban in the comments in any discussion for anything Volume 6 and beyond. What gripped me about this volume, the villains in this were some of the best that, no, not some of, the villains in this were the best that we've got so far. Much better than the flops in Volume 3. I love that we got to see some of the gung-ho guns that aren't aligned with knives, that have their own personal motives, that have second thoughts about what they've been hired to do, that maybe even have a conscience. And as crazy good as this volume is, it really is all just set up for Volume 5. And Volume 5, Volume 5. After I read Volume 5, I was like, man, I need to rip out my heart with my own fingernails. I don't remember writing that. That seems kind of extreme. But if that's what I wrote in the script right after finishing Volume 5, then I'll stick with that. So Volume 4 opens with a little bit of breathing room, I would say. Vash and Wolfwood are taking some time to recover and just live among the people of Ship 3. Jessica is cooking dinner for Vash and Brad and Wolfwood and these two random little kids. And I don't know who these kids are. Maybe Brad or Jessica's little siblings or just random kids from the community. But I love that Wolfwood and Vash, if they have any downtime, they're constantly surrounded by kids. And they're right for that. At any given function, I will be at the kids' table. I think because I grew up with so many younger siblings and I've always been babysitting or volunteering or working with kids in some capacity ever since I was a kid myself, I have a huge soft spot for stories and characters who are able to center children. Not specifically stories about children, but stories with characters who acknowledge the importance of children and the duty that each of us has to guide them and to love them and to treat them as people. Wolfwood had thought that since Ship 3 has so many plants that maybe their food would be extra special and delicious, but they just eat regular food. And Brad and Jessica take offense to this and start arguing with each other. But Vash explains that the reason they live so plainly on Ship 3 despite their abundance of plants is because the plants power a satellite that has been broadcasting back to Earth. The ship uses enough power to run the daily lives of a few hundred people and to power the cryosleep chamber, but everything else is diverted to interplanetary communication. I said in a prior video that I think while Ship 3 lives well, they probably either don't have enough resources to share or they have to keep a low profile to stay safe from knives. And those things still could be right, but I was majorly wrong about one thing. They're not an insular community because they're protecting their own. They're insular because they're trying to save the entire planet. To me, this broadcast is a prayer, sending a message to whoever is out there in faith that they're listening and that someday salvation will come. So Vash takes Wolfwood to see the satellite, and Wolfwood is genuinely so moved by this. He's astonished. He's contemplative. Take your pick out of the words in the thesaurus. He feels deeply, it seems too good to be true, that salvation could come for them in their lifetimes. That someone out there could be listening. He says, on this godforsaken planet, we've reached the limit of life it can support. I'm trying to protect children, but if the local plant were to die tomorrow, they'd all die in the sun. And so he says a prayer, echoing the prayer of the broadcast. He says, Lord, I don't ask for salvation. Please just grant us hope to reach tomorrow. Amen. This prayer, reading this for the first time, almost made me ugly cry. I work with kids in a pretty underserved community, and the day that I read this chapter, or maybe like a couple days before, I had just got the news that the funding for our program might be pulled and the city would have to shut us down. And everything was just so uncertain. And every day we were just hanging on, trying to make the most out of our time with those kids, not knowing if this week might be the last week that we have with them. Every day I felt like Wolfwood, just pray and get us through today. It's like the Lord's Prayer. It says, give us this day our daily bread. Not bread for a week or bread for the year, but just get me through today. And we'll worry about tomorrow when tomorrow comes. Every day there's providence enough to just get us through the day. And I'm grateful for that. And so sometime after Wolfwood's prayer, I don't know how long, but they're wearing different outfits. So we know some time has passed. A message comes through from off-planet. People from Earth have built warp drives, and in just a few years, they will be coming to bring the people of this desert planet home. And it means so much to me that the ship 3 people still refer to Earth as home. Luda makes an announcement, and Vash and Wolfwood dap up. Everybody gets to partying, and Millie and Meryl get shwasted. I'm honestly so obsessed with the decision to put Vash in tight mom jeans and a color gradient hoodie, and Wolfwood in business casual and indoor sunglasses. I had to draw them. Also, Millie in this chapter looks like she's wearing the exact same outfit that Vash was wearing in the last chapter of Volume 3. So either they somehow acquired matching outfits, or they share clothes. I hope it's the second option. During the party, Luida sees a vision, like a Force ghost of Sensei who is not beating the Master Yoda allegations. And he says that this is only the beginning and they have a lot left to do. Which is exactly what Vash was thinking to himself last chapter. And Ship 3 knows how to party. Everybody's drunk themselves under the table, blasted, conked out in the dining hall. Vash is asleep on a table with a tie tied around his head, which I have seen images of that, and now I know where it comes from. And he suddenly jolts awake to something. He can sense Knives' presence, or not his presence, Knives' malice from wherever he is. Just like he could tell in the original Trigun when Knives had returned. I think the same thing happened where he woke up because he could sense Knives' presence. And Knives uses his knife abilities to cut across an enormous swath of Earth. So wide that to display the whole thing in one panel, like the camera, so to speak, is all the way out in space and we can see the curvature of the planet. That's how big of a scale we're talking. I'm so sorry, but why is the town on this signpost called Korchi? So Knives cuts apart the satellite, severing communication between Earth and the planet. I forget if the planet is No Man's Land or Gunsmoke. I've seen both. I don't know which name for the planet belongs to which Trigun canon, but I'm kind of wondering if this was maybe his plan all along. Like, the reason he hasn't exterminated all of humanity yet on this planet is because he's stranded here too. Maybe he wants to let the people on this planet contact Earth to bring Earth people and ships back here so he can either, number one, have a shot at killing more humans, the Earth humans, and number two, hijack a ship and go off-world to exterminate humanity at its source on Earth or any other planets that might have been colonized since the crash. Because in Trigun Minimum Volume 2, Baby Knives basically said that the whole universe should belong to him and Vash. And so by crashing these ships on a desert planet that can't really support life, plant or human, he's stranded himself there too. He can't build any sort of paradise for himself or the other plants on this planet because it's inhospitable to plants and they need the humans in order to survive. I mean, I suppose he could survive on his own on this planet, but I don't think that he necessarily wants a solo existence for all of eternity. But I don't know, maybe I'm applying too much of Tri-Stamp Knives' motivations to Trimax Knives. But I guess that just remains to be seen. So Vash knows something is clearly wrong. He sobers up, gears up, and he sets out from home. Brad catches him before he leaves, and they briefly confirm with each other that the satellite was sabotaged, and it was probably Knives, but Vash doesn't want anyone except Luida to know. I just think it's so lovely that Brad, back in Volume 1, was like so scared and mistrustful of Vash, and now he trusts him implicitly. Brad's like, you're just gonna leave without saying goodbye? And Vash says it's not goodbye forever. He'll come back. And he walks out of the ship to see Wolfwood geared up and ready and waiting for him. Believe it or not, this is not the only panel in this manga of Wolfwood picking his nose. Vash is like, what are you doing here? And Wolfwood says, hey, as long as Knives is still out there, the fighting ain't over, so you still need me around. Chapter 2. Mid-Valley the Horn Freak me get through this video without laughing at his name challenge. Impossible. Mid-Valley the Horn Freak and Hopper the Gauntlet are walking through a black void. I'm not entirely sure what this scenario is supposed to be. They are quite literally just walking through the void. And they encounter a piece of infrastructure that's been sliced through so cleanly that it is actually a reflective surface. I can't tell what this is supposed to be, if they're in a building or a ship or what. But Mid-Valley says it sliced up the whole block. So maybe they're outdoors in the middle of the night somewhere? Comments enlighten me. But Mid-Valley immediately knows that whatever cut through this thing, that was Knives doing. He says he can hear it. He can tell by the sound that whatever did this was inhuman. He's always been able to intuit things just based on sound alone. And he thinks to himself how back in the day before all of this started, he should have sensed trouble coming. But he says instinct doesn't work on pure, unmitigated evil. We flash back to Mid-Valley and his band playing in a venue to a dead audience. Literally. Slay the house down, okay? You ever play the saxophone so good that people die? So everybody's dead except for one man in the back in this in-sync looking jacket. Girl, bye. This man, of course, is Knives, who applauds not only this band's beautiful murder music, but also the way they were willing to kill everyone in the room just to get to the one man who was their target. And he says that he is collecting knives. He's collecting ruthless people who will help him carry out his bidding. And he sees a, dare I say, a kindred spirit in Mid-Valley, but perhaps only in Mid-Valley, because he kills the rest of the band. And Mid-Valley becomes one of Knives' knives for years, carrying out hits, killing anyone for Knives without remorse. And he says he never once saw any emotion or pity or anything from Knives, except for one time, a glimpse of something that might have been satisfaction, like the face someone might make when you kill a roach that was in your house. But even as one of Knives' elite employees, Mid-Valley and the rest of the guns, they are, as I'm always saying, not exempt from Knives' hatred and desire to exterminate all of humanity. And Mid-Valley's been caught in this game of suffering ever since the day he agreed to work for Knives, and there's no way out. And it's crazy because, like, he was killing people even before Knives recruited him, right? But whatever he's had to do for Knives is so much worse than that he's like, man, I have got to stop. I have got to get out of here. So Legato and Knives have a bit of a business meeting, and Legato reports that Nine Lives and the Puppet Master are most likely dead since there's been no contact with them for a while, and Zazie is still out there searching for Vash, and Chapel has gone rogue. Knives says Chapel isn't a problem, actually. He's being the perfect babysitter. Just what I asked him to do. Legato is shocked to hear this, because he has to be Knives' favorite at all times. He's actually upset that Knives kept him out of the loop. And Mid-Valley is lying in wait for Legato outside this meeting with his saxophone, and he wants to kill Legato so bad. But he really isn't sure, even with Legato paralyzed, that he could kill him. I mean, he tried before and got bodied. Mid-Valley is probably dead either way. If he kills Legato, Knives will kill him. And if he tries to kill Legato and fails, Legato will kill him. And if he does nothing and obeys orders, he's next up on the chopping block, and he's going to be killed like the other half of the Gung Ho Guns have been. He's been Knives' slave for so long, and now he wants out. But he can't do it. He can't rebel. He can't bring himself to try to stand up to Legato again. He has flashbacks to the cold and instantaneous way that Knives killed the rest of his band, and he's so terrified that he can't do it. And so Legato sends out Hopper and Mid-Valley together to deal with Vash next. Vash and Wolfwood are trekking through the desert because their vehicle broke down, and they are dusty and sweaty and dying, and Vash collapses in the sand like, no, Rem, it's all going white. And Wolfwood is like trying to keep him moving. And he says, who the hell is that woman anyway? And that's hilarious to me because Rem is so central to Vash and Knives and this whole story, but Wolfwood has no idea. He doesn't even know about Rem. They don't even have dental. And now that we know a little bit more about what's going on between Wolfwood and Knives and Legato, this line from Wolfwood, quote, if he dies out here, it'll all be for nothing, takes on a much more ominous tone. And then Millie drives by in a car with Meryl in the passenger seat, chugging water, wasting water. She might as well be giving the boys a huge middle finger because they don't stop. They drive right past them. And the boys have to chase after the car. I love this panel. They look like little bugs. Wolfwood's expletive of choice is Buddha in hell, which I assume might be a real phrase or expletive in Japanese. I don't think it's close to anything in English, so it just sounds really funny and creative coming from the mouth of my beautiful Catholic wife. Why did I say that? Vash and Wolfwood end up at a hospital to get treatment for their dehydration and probably heat exhaustion as well. And they look like those drawings of like SpongeBob dehydrated. You know what I'm talking about. And the girls go grab a bite to eat. I don't know if the girls are back to work at this point doing their insurance thing or if they're technically still on vacation because I don't know how long it's been. I think maybe they're back to work, which is why they're following Vash around. And while the girls are out, they rescue this other girl from a creep who just randomly grabs her and is like, "You're gonna be my wife now." Okay. Millie knocks him down with her stun gun, and Meryl draws her tiny little pistol on him. And she says, though this pistol is small, its power is sufficient. And they get this guy turned into the authorities and save that girl. And Meryl remembers somebody who gave her this gun as a way to even her odds and keep herself safe. Even though she doesn't like guns, a small woman such as herself needs to carry something in this world to keep her safe. And the quote, "though this pistol is small, its power is sufficient," is exactly what her mentor slash father, uncle, Roberto, whoever, had told her when he gave the gun to her. Meanwhile, Zazie the Beast has been watching the girls. Dude, my pronunciation is trash. I'm pretty sure they say it Zazie in the show. I feel like Zazie sounds better than Zazie. Zazie just sounds like Zaza. I don't care. I'm gonna keep saying Zazie. So Vash and Wolfwood check themselves out of the hospital. As soon as he's out the doors, Wolfwood's got a cigarette in his hand. And Vash tells the doctors and nurses, like, "I know you want us to spend more time in recovery, but we're fine for now. We can walk again. And you can keep all our extra money because I'm sure we'll be back here in need of your services shortly." And Vash and Wolfwood kind of argue about what to do about the girls. Wolfwood thinks that joining up with them puts the girls in danger, and he's correct. And maybe they should get back at the girls for pulling that stunt with the water earlier and just abandon them. But Vash is like, "You're not really asking me, are you? You're not asking me my opinion. You're asking yourself what you think we should do. When you say, 'Can you afford to stand by and watch them die?' to me, you're really asking that of yourself." Dude, Vash read that man for filth. Vash says, "I think we should catch up with the girls because I think they know what they're getting themselves into. They've been the ones following me, so it's not like we are the ones putting them at risk. We can't really stop them if they want to keep following us." So Mid-Valley and Hopper are on a sand steamer on their way to Vash's location, and they're having a conversation. Hopper knows that Mid-Valley is different from the rest of them, that he wants out, and so he asks him point blank. He says, "Do you intend to escape? Do you think that you can? You know that we're just tools, and Knives hates us as much as he hates everyone else. And once we're not useful to him anymore, we're dead." And Mid-Valley just says, "And you're okay with that?" And Hopper says, "Yeah, I just want revenge on Vash. That's my only purpose for living, and it'll be a relief when it's over." But he says, "If you survive Mid-Valley, make sure no one ever knows I was there. Erase our footprints." Millie and Meryl go back to the hospital to get Vash and Wolfwood, but of course they're gone, so they go back out into the night to find them, but Zazie snatches Meryl up. She was right behind Millie. And poor Millie has no idea what happened, and wanders around all night looking for Meryl. The sun is bright overhead when she stumbles past a restaurant where Vash and Wolfwood are eating, and Wolfwood sees her and calls her over, and she just bursts into tears. This poor girl. I don't think Wolfwood even knows the girls' names. He always just calls Millie Big Girl and Meryl the Small Woman. I think he does know their names, and he just refuses to use their names. It's kind of endearing, but I also think that he nicknames people because he doesn't want to get close to them. Nicknaming them is a way to keep them at arm's length, right? It's part of his mask, or maybe not mask, it's part of his defense mechanism to act like he doesn't care. Reading Trigun and analyzing Wolfwood has messed me up. You know, I'll be sitting there pointing and laughing at Wolfwood. Like, man, you would not be so angry all the time if you were simply not so scared all the time. not realizing I do that. I'm doing way better now, but at the time of reading this, I was not in a place where I had much agency at all over my own life, and everything I tried to do to regain that agency would fall apart. And it took me so long to realize that I was scared, and that fear was making me combative and hostile and self-isolating. And I only realized that when I was pointing and laughing at Wolfwood, exhibiting those exact same behaviors. Why would I pay for therapy when reading Trigun is free? Meryl wakes up in a cage surrounded by our trio of Zazie, Mid-Valley, and Hopper. And Zazie says she's not a hostage, she's bait. Hopper tries to intimidate her into giving up information about Vash, but she's like, I don't even know who you are. She's so tough, even when she's been kidnapped by this freak squad. She doesn't even flinch. And that pays off, because Hopper decides to leave her alone, since she apparently doesn't know anything. Vash and Wolfwood take Millie back to their room, and Pobrecita is just bundled up in the bed, looking so tragic and forlorn as Vash and Wolfwood try to make a plan for what to do next. But they don't even have time to make a plan before Zazie shows up right outside the window and says, I have Meryl, there will be no negotiation, you're gonna have to fight if you want to save her. And Vash just jumps out the window immediately, like Obi-Wan Kenobi in Attack of the Clones, onto the giant worm that Zazie is riding, and it starts flying around, and Wolfwood is trying to shoot, but doesn't want to hit Vash, and Zazie just boots Vash off the worm. Oopsie. And Zazie and the worm tunnel away, saying they'll be waiting in the dragon's nest. So whatever town or part of the planet they're in now is very China-inspired. They've been eating with chopsticks. That weird guy that wanted to take the girl for his wife had the full Fu Manchu facial hair, and his hair was in a queue, and the girl herself was wearing a qipao. And there's this big imperial-looking fortress at the center of the city. So it's kind of interesting to think that distinct ethnic things from Earth culture have survived these hundreds of years and flourished in their own pockets on this desert planet. The city around the fortress is densely populated, all sorts of people and buildings stacked haphazardly on top of each other. And Vash immediately knows that this is a calculated move to disadvantage him and Wolfwood in the upcoming fight. They specifically picked this place because of the collateral. But Wolfwood is unexpectedly in his corner and says, rest easy. While we're in charge, that bastard's killing no one. And if the people get in the way, we'll make sure to get him out. Wolfwood. Thank you, Wolfwood. But he tells Millie to stay back. This isn't her fight. But she says, I don't want to. This is my fight. She says, Meryl has always got me out of trouble, and I need to try to do the same for her. But Wolfwood still says a very emphatic no. He knows these people. He knows what they're up against. But she just says, try me, and hefts her giant gun in his direction. And Vash acquiesces. He says, okay, you can stick with us. Because even if Millie stays behind, she's not guaranteed any degree of safety in this area. They don't know what kind of trap is waiting for them. With all the people and all the infrastructure jam-packed in one place, one small disaster could impact the whole area. Hopper is watching them from the top of the citadel, and Vash notices him right before he launches himself like a bullet at them. His internal monologue on the page says he's no longer human, but just a bullet meant to kill Vash. It's hard to describe exactly how he operates, but basically he's got these like big, strong arms and like small legs and mechanical parts that are attached to him that launch him forward at tremendous speed, turning him into like a massive projectile. In the destruction that follows, Wolfwood gets separated from Vash and Millie and ends up right underneath like I think it's a fire escape, where Mid-Valley is grooving, and he blasts the snot out of Wolfwood. When Naito-sensei drew this, people died. White suit, JoJo pose, sax blast, horn freak, the house down, boots. Buildings crumbled, glass shattered, Wolfwood's brain obliterated. And I mean that. Mid-Valley thinks that he's killed him, and with that performance, he is well within his right to believe that. After these two massive attacks, the place is in shambles. Vash tells Millie to get gone as he's gearing up to fight, and Hopper starts to monologue a bit, because of course he can't have his revenge on Vash if Vash doesn't even know who he is. He says, this isn't business, this is personal. I've turned myself into a single-minded machine meant to kill you. And you are free to take these 2 coin halves if you can kill me. Millie is frozen with fear because she now understands why Wolfwood didn't want her involved in this. And she thinks that Wolfwood must be some kind of monster to be able to face off against these other monsters. That just about killed me. Millie snaps out of her fear when Vash just says, Yeah, I'm not interested. I just came here for Meryl. Can I have her back? And Hopper is like, oh, well, there goes my plans. Guess I'll just kill you quickly. But he goes for Millie first. Vash shoots to protect her, and Hopper revels in this. He wanted to goad Vash into a fight. He wanted to toy with his emotions. He wanted to put people that Vash loves in danger and force him into places he doesn't want to be in. Mid-Valley had left Wolfwood for dead, but Wolfwood gets back up. Sam. Naito-sensei went no holds barred with him and Mid-Valley. The two of them go insano style in this and the next volume. I think whole essays can, should, shall, and will be written about these parallel panels of Wolfwood firing up at Mid-Valley and Vash firing down on Hopper. Wolfwood is clawing his way up and giving everything he can just to survive, and Vash is coming down from above with restraint to keep his enemy in check and to keep himself in check. Vash is this angel who came down from the stars, and Wolfwood is a man born from the dust of this planet. Zazie is watching over Meryl in the cage and also watching this fight and says, man, I can't believe they're really brothers. And Meryl is like, what? And so Zazie tells her the story of the crash. The worms, the bugs, saw humans and plants fall from the sky, and as the native life forms of this planet, they've been watching this story unfold since the beginning. Vash and Knives have tremendous power stored up within them, because they are, in fact, independent plants. The word Zazie uses is self-reliant, but I'm taking that as the term independent. And these independents have been existing alongside humanity in secret ever since the crash. And humanity's two greatest disasters, the July disaster and the Fifth Moon incident, were because of them. I don't know what Meryl thought of Vash before learning this information. Surely she didn't think that he was just a human. But maybe she did, because if you don't think other life forms, other humanoid-looking life forms can exist, then what else was she supposed to think he was? Maybe she thought that he was just some human that was extremely weird and unlucky. But I'm interested to see what Meryl does with this information going forward. I would like for her and Vash to have a conversation about this. Mid-Valley gets the heck out of Dodge once Wolfwood starts blasting with the Punisher. He'd severely underestimated Wolfwood when he should have known better, because if Wolfwood is one of the gung-ho guns, it's assumed he's on the same level as all these other guys. So Mid-Valley tries to respond with another saxophone blast, but can't hit the right note. So he escapes back to the Citadel, where Zazie is, and he's so funny. He tells Zazie, yeah, I only let Chapel think he got the better of me. This is part of my plan. I was pretending to be weak. Mid-Valley, as if you weren't hightailing and scared out of there as soon as you saw that Jesus gun. It's not a crime to be a coward. I think it is a crime to be a coward and pretend like you're not. And that's a repeated theme that we see over and over again with Mid-Valley, where he stood up to Legato once, and then since then, he just can't be brave enough. I mean, and understandably so. I mean, I'm not saying that, like, he should have fought Legato and Knives. He would have died. But it's like, we just see this recurring theme. He wants to be somebody better. He wants to be brave. He wants to be able to fight back. He wants to be able to leave. And at every turn, he just can't. Vash is doing his best in the fight against Hoppard, and he's trying to get bystanders out of the way. But Hoppard says there's nowhere to run. And the real thing these people should be running from is you, Vash. This whole time, Hoppard's hatred for Vash was because of what happened in July. And when he says that to Vash, Vash pleads with him. He says, no, I didn't do it. That wasn't me. But Hoppard's rage cannot be pacified. And it's easy to understand why once we see an image of the blast that destroyed the city. Hoppard had survived because he was on the outskirts. And Vash is struggling after so many of these violent attacks from Hoppard, paired with the guilt leveled at him and the memories coming back to the surface. He is not looking so hot. Well, actually, he does look kind of hot. He looks kind of hot and bothered, if you ask me. I don't know if I should say this. Do I think that these couple of panels were drawn to look strangely or somewhat sexual on purpose? Maybe. Am I reading something into them that might not be there? Also maybe. But Vash is trying to suppress his plant form. And the only other time that we've seen his plant form take over was in that awful scene at the end of Trigun Minimum with Knives. that also had a sexual bent to it. So I'm not going to say anything for sure. I'm just bookmarking this information in case there is a metaphor or a thread there to follow up on later. I could be way off base. Maybe I'm the freak for thinking this. And this is just the way that Naito-sensei draws his characters when they're scared and exhausted. Because you could say that Millie and Wolfwood are both drawn in a somewhat similar fashion when they're scared and beat up in this same chapter. But yeah. Actually, I don't think that I was way off base with this, because if we look at the way that Knives talks about how using plant powers, or the angel arm specifically, feels in Volume 5, he uses some very interesting language here, let's just say that. Okay, sorry about that. Millie and the bystanders are trying to get to safety, and some people in the crowd find Wolfwood half drowned in a puddle. Sir, you are dying on the ground. Why is your jawline so perfectly drawn like that? So Millie gets to him and gets him up. This interaction is really cute. He says, "Hey, big girl, are you okay?" And she says, "That's my line." And once he gets his bearings, he says he's got to go out on alone, that Millie just needs to get out of here. And when Wolfwood gets up, we see some panels that are pitch black except for his thoughts. And then he says, "Millie, how did you find me?" And she's like, "What are you talking about?" And he says, "Okay, I'm leaving. We can't rescue Meryl." And she's like, "What? I don't understand. Why? You just said you were going to go. Why would you just leave?" He's blind. It took me several reads to understand that interaction. I think I went to Jupiter before reading this volume. But once I realized what had happened, I was like, oh, wait, the way that was written was really good. Wolfwood won't admit what's going on with him. He's still doing that thing where he's keeping people at a distance. But he's been blinded and doesn't want her to know. Whether that's out of his own sense of pride and self-preservation, or because he doesn't want her to freak out, or he doesn't want to admit a weakness and then become a target, I don't know. But the indirectness in this scene, the way that it plays out, I think is so important to looking at Wolfwood's character. When Millie won't leave him alone, he turns around and knocks her out with the Punisher to keep her out of the fighting. This poor girl, she got flattened. Millie Thompson found dead in Miami. And all the bystanders, all the people around him are just booing him. And they're right. He deserves it. He's like, okay, fine. So if one of you people go take her to safety, I'll go do what I gotta do. He got shamed into diving back into the hostage situation. Back to Vash. Vash is unwell. And as he's lying in the rubble, he can see straight up into the sky the moon that he put a hole in, peering down at him like some giant eyeball. And all of these awful memories of July come flooding back, and it is quite possible that this is the very first time that Vash is remembering anything from July, because use of his angel arm in July wiped so much from his memory. Unless he was able to come to terms with memories or something in the couple of years that he spent as Eric's, this is probably the first time that the full weight of what happened to him and because of him is hitting him. And he thinks, I did this. It was my own sin. I am a murderer. And Hopper gets in his face and taunts him about his impending death. But Vash says, the Angel of Death and I are old friends, but this is maybe the closest we've been. And Hopper is brutal. He says, I should just tear you apart. But even that wouldn't be enough. And Vash says, same here. And I don't know if he's saying, I too want to tear you apart, or I too wish that you would tear me apart. It might be the second one, because with tears streaming down his face, he says, you can go ahead and kill me, but I cannot let you do it until I've taken care of Knives. And Hopper just spits back, you're pathetic. And he leaves Vash, crying and furious in the rubble. This exchange was nothing but pure seething hatred from Hopper. And I think that he's disappointed that the man he hates isn't someone who's going to give him what he wants, who isn't going to give him the fight that he wants. But Hopper is smart and calculated, and he is tormenting Vash in really effective ways, using emotions and July and Meryl against him in blow after blow of psychological warfare. And I think aside from when he was with Knives, this is the lowest we've seen Vash. His guilt and his pain and his hatred, it just makes him sick with shame. But he's still painfully honest. When he says, "You can kill me once I deal with Knives," coming from a less earnest character, that line might be a ploy to turn Hopper against Knives, or to plant a seed of doubt, to make him see that Knives is using him and Vash is the only way to stop Knives. But it's not that. Vash is just being as real as he possibly can with this man whom he has hurt immensely, who is symbolic of all of the pain and the rage that many of the people on this planet feel against Vash. It's really tragic and beautiful that even if all other motivation or love is stripped away, Vash in his heart knows that he has to stay alive to deal with his brother, whatever that might mean. Or else everything he and Rem did to save these people will be for nothing. Only then can he allow himself to lay down and die like he thinks he deserves. And it's crazy that even as Vash is telling Hopper that he wants to kill him, or that he should let Hopper kill him, he's picturing Rem in his mind. Genuinely, she's the only thing holding him together. Everything he has ever done has been for her, because of her, and because it's for her sake, it is also for Knives' sake, for the sake of this whole godforsaken planet. And as Mid-Valley and Hopper regroup in the Citadel, a huge airship flies over, and in the airship, a fancy lady on the phone with Knives tells him that she will take care of his little brother. Quote, "Bringing about the despair of mankind will be easier than dumping water out of a glass." Vash has been pushed to the brink, and she will deliver the final blow. And this will resume in Volume 5. It's hard to say concluding remarks about Volume 4 because it's so tied into Volume 5. So without getting too deep into Volume 5, there's just a couple things I want to say. I think Millie's role in this fight is really good. I think it's handled well. She gets to do more further on. She needs to have a role within the story. We don't want to see her sidelined, but we also have to be realistic and not endanger her unnecessarily. And so there's a good balance, I think, between let's not get this civilian who's not necessarily a fighter caught up in this battle, but also let's let her help and do what she can and not push her away, because Meryl is dear to her and she deserves to know what's going on and to be involved in this rescue attempt. So I appreciate that. And something that I think is done phenomenally well is upping the ante within the narrative. This is actually something that I think takes a lot of skill to do as an author, because if the scale stays too slow or too repetitive for too long, your audience loses interest. But if you do too much too quick, when every fight becomes some world-ending catastrophe, then there's no stakes. Everything loses its impact, and it becomes boring just in the opposite direction. So I think starting from something huge at the end of Trigun Minimum, Trigun Original, so that we know what the story is threatening us with, we know what Knives is capable of, we have an idea of what's going to come at the end of this story, and then dipping down to smaller things with different focuses, different fights coming from different angles, where sometimes it's more about the combat, sometimes it's about the emotions, sometimes it's about the philosophy, all the while building, scaling back up to that place of inevitable enormity with Knives at the end, I think shows a mastery of narrative pace and structure on Naito Sensei's part. So I think that's all for this one. Thank you so much for watching these. These manga videos don't get as many views on my channel. They're probably tanking my channel, but I don't care because I like making them. I'm not sure if part 5 will be coming next or something will be in between, because I do have footage of me reacting to the first episode of Trigun 1998 that I filmed back in January and just never posted because I wasn't happy with it. But I have it, and I might as well use it, and to re-react I think would be fake. So I will probably dig that footage up and turn it into something, even if it's just a short video, even if it's like 10 minutes. But be forewarned, it is from 5 months ago. Thanks for watching. I'll see you around. Peace and love on planet Earth, baby.